Hello and welcome to another video. My name is Ben and I'm a self-taught web developer. I went from zero to paid full stack in 8 months, self-taught via the Odin project. And in today's video, I wanted to talk to you about a question that I got the other day, and that is, what is good code? In my last video, I was talking about one of the hardest things I find in software development, and that is writing good code, based on understanding the requirements properly. But any code is easy to write. Good code is harder to write. What exactly is good code? It's kind of hard to define that specifically because, like in many cases, the answer always is it depends. And in this case, it depends on multiple things. Now, there are things that make code better, and the more of these things that you do to make your code better, the more higher chances are that it's good code. But I would say there's always, when you're developing professionally, there's always a fine line between perfection and shipping product. And most companies are going to be placing a priority on shipping product, and perfection is going to be secondary. Perfection is going to slow things down, and perfection is that pursuit towards getting the best code that you can imagine in your own mind of how this might work. Whereas, your users are waiting for a feature, the company's going to want you to ship that feature rather than get things perfect. If you're working for NASA or you're doing things in healthcare where you can't have mistakes and bugs because it will be costly or more costly, then there is probably going to be more of a requirement for perfection, or at least really good code. But in terms of web development, if you get a bug, usually the consequences aren't too high unless you're dealing with something like payments, something to do with money. Then you've got to be a bit more cognizant of potential for bugs and have the best code that you can write in the time that you're given. But good code really, it depends on multiple things. And I think in the context of studying, when you're writing projects, small projects, you might write, you're sorting an array. You might have a tic-tac-toe project or a calculator or something like that. Good code is code that just works. If your calculator works, your tic-tac-toe game works, and it covers the edge cases, then it's good code. In my opinion, it doesn't really matter how ugly the code is, really, as long as it works. Now, is it the best code? No, it isn't. But I think a really good first step is covering edge cases and writing something that is just going to work as you need it, as you expect it to, reliably. That is good code. That's good enough. Now, as you get into the professional setting, I think the requirements around good enough become a little more stringent because you're now having to think about maintainability. You're not just writing code that has to work and cover edge cases, you're writing code that has to be looked at by other people in the future, and it has to be maintained by other people in the future. And that's something that then means you're going to have to write code that is considerate of these things. My dog's lost me, silly dog. Here she comes. It means you're writing code that is considerate of this, and that means it has to be organized well. It has to be written based on, let's say, conventions in whatever tech framework that you're using or language that you're using. It has to be written in a way, organized in a way that a developer can come in there, understand how something complex is pieced together, so that they can then go in and refactor it if they need to, or at least understand it if they want to build a feature on top of it or what have you. So that's going to be another component of good code. It's something that's organized well and easy to understand. And that therefore makes it more maintainable. And this is something that is echoed a lot in software development, is the maintainability of your code. And that goes really hand in hand with, in part, with how well it's organized and how it's structured. You've probably heard of a thing called technical debt, right? And that's where you write code in a way that has imperfections that should be fixed, will need to be fixed in the future. You're therefore incurring a debt because you're pushing something out today with the debt of having to refactor it in the future. It happens a lot. Pretty much every pull request you make professionally, no, it's a lie, not every, but every project you work on professionally, there's a high chance that there's going to be a small amount of technical debt. Some technical debt does not matter, doesn't really ever have to be refactored. other technical debt is far more, let's say, a higher priority that needs to be refactored. And ideally, the bigger the priority that technical debt is, the less likelihood that you're actually going to introduce it in the first place. So that's another component of good code, whether or not you're introducing technical debt. I think another factor of good code is code that's efficient, code that is going to scale, because oftentimes in web apps you're starting to deal, as they grow, with a lot more data, and you're going to have to write code that manipulates and works with that data in a way that is as efficient as possible with the resources that you have on hand. So that you know, there's multiple ways to write something. You could have really let's say inefficient code with n+1 queries, really inefficient querying of databases. You could have code that has, you know, tons of nested loops and things like that. It's going to work, especially at a smaller scale. It will work. Maybe it's good enough at that point, at that scale. But as things scale up and get bigger and there's far more data, far more requests being handled by the system, then it matters how efficient your code is. And then that's going to become another criteria of what is good code. So these are just some of the things that I was thinking about, what makes good code. And to summarize that, I'd say something that is readable, organized well, something that works for the situation that it's written for. And as things like stakes, as stakes become higher, i.e. you're working professionally on an app that is of scale, then you got to pay more attention to things like efficiency of your code and technical debt. And there's probably other factors that make good code as well. If I've missed something here, throw it in the comments below, because I'm sure there is something I missed. These are just some thoughts coming into my head as I'm walking my dog here. But yeah, that's what I think makes good code. Don't obsess. I would say my advice to people who are learning right now, don't obsess about perfection. Do your best to write what you can well. I think the most important thing when you're learning is to just write code that works and covers the edge cases. It doesn't matter if it's ugly code. My first code when I was doing my first projects in JavaScript and Ruby, it was really ugly. And if I looked at it today, I'd be like, wow, okay, that sucks. And I would write it very differently. But it doesn't matter, because I really paid attention to make sure that I had my edge cases covered. And I had a reliable application, or project, mini application, that just worked. And that's fine. That is good enough. It met the objectives of the lesson. You can always go back and think about how you might improve your code. One thing I did that really helped me was read solutions that other people wrote. And there are a couple people, for example, in the Odin project, who were really good and reliable for good solutions. So I'd always check their stuff after I'd written mine, and I'd learn a lot that way. I didn't have LLMs at the time, so I didn't have the luxury of going to ChatGPT and asking it. But to be honest, the more and more I look online and we learn about LLMs, developers are getting lazy and they're losing their ability to think critically and problem solve, because they're allowing LLMs to take that job on. And I just don't think that they're a great tool while you're learning. I would stay away from them as much as you can while you're doing those really fundamental reps in the gym to learn the fundamentals of programming. Stay away from LLMs. I don't think they're going to help you that much. They could, but I think let's put it this way. If you became a developer without one, I think you'd be a far stronger developer at 12 months down the road than one who learned using LLMs. That's just my opinion. So yeah, I didn't have those at my disposal to really help me, but I could see them having some value of you plugging your code in and saying, hey, what would you do to improve this code? And it would give you stuff back. But there's nothing that's going to just beat you munging through someone else's code and having to understand it, just reading it line by line rather than having an LLM tell you what to do. Anyway, that's enough of that tangent. That's what I think good code is. And there's probably other things. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks. Bye-bye.